One, two, three.
Welcome to Scéalta. My name is Joe Austin, and as you've just joined us, I would remind you that Scéalta is a production of What You Fears to Hear and Feel and Fubble. And I want to thank the Connolly Centre for again facilitating our interviews. We couldn't really do it without them. This week marks the 50th anniversary of the massacre that has become globally known as Bloody Sunday. And it's my privilege and honour that we have two family members with us to do this special Scéalta that looks at not only the events of that particular day, but the effects on a city, on a community, and on the families of those who were murdered. And all these years, our families in particular have came to cope with all that's been thrown at them. We've John McKinney, whose brother Willie was one of those who was murdered on that fateful day, and Tony Doherty, and I have to declare an interest. He's a lifelong friend, so if I appear to be biased, it's because I am. And he is, again, the son of Paddy, who was murdered on that particular day. So you're both welcome to Belfast, and I appreciate the fact that you've taken this trouble in the midst of all that you're trying to organise in Derry and the 50th anniversary and all of that. When you look back 50 years, it seems like a click of fingers, but I'm sure that's not your experience at it. So, John, if we can start with you, perhaps.
Well, I was 8 years old when Bloody Sunday happened. I was pretty young, and by the time the campaign started, around about the early 90s, late 1980s, it was finally, at that time, the first kind of contact I had with Tony was that Tony's wife came to my door and asked me if they would have been interested in the campaign about Bloody Sunday. And I said at that time that's what I really wanted at that time, because there's a lot of questions to be answered.
You are a founder member of the Bloody Sunday campaign. Do you remember your rate? Do you have memories of Willie?
I do. Most of them are happy memories. He was a keen photographer. He worked for the Derry Journal, but he had a cine camera and he had a still camera. And but his job in the Derry Journal was he was a compositor. He worked out all the columns and all. And so I have really good memories of him bringing his girlfriend into the house and stuff like that, and eating toasted baps and stuff like that. On
Big boys' food.
The time that you weren't allowed to go near the biscuits until the visitors went out of the house and stuff like that.
Well, I think we all have experienced that. The reason I'm going to ask both of you the same question. The reason I asked it is it's not to upset you, and I want to apologise if it do upset you, because that's certainly not my intention. One of the things I think that's the gap when we talk about Bloody Sunday or the Ballymurphy massacre or McGurk's bar or that, it being reported by the establishment media talks about families as if they're campaigns. It doesn't talk about families as if they are the brothers, sisters, sons, daughters of victims of murder. And it's very much in stark contrast from other reported events where people lost their lives. So that's why I wanted to ask you that question. Just what Willie was like. He was like as a person.
He was a real person. So he was.
Yeah.
And he wasn't a statistic. He was a real person, and the thing about it is that he had a lot to give, because he had a whole life to live. He was engaged to be married, and he was our oldest brother. And I think in those days, in the early 70s, if you got a good job like the Derry Journal, they worked in the Derry Journal, he had a whole really good life ahead of him and stuff like that. And so, but Wally was just, he was a cameraman. He loved taking photos and stuff like that. And I always thought they would have went into the media maybe. At one time. Yeah. But he used to follow my mother in the house all the time. Although she didn't want to, but he filmed her all the time, and we still have all that stuff. And somebody said, I read there not so long ago that I think it was somebody that actually worked in the Derry Journal, that he said that he worked that Friday, 2 days before Bloody Sunday, and he laid out all the stuff in the Derry Journal for that Tuesday. Little did he know that he was going to be part of that story.
Tony, kind of the same question. You know, your father. I think you were about 8 as well, were you?
I was 9. I'm grand old age of 59 now.
Ah, well, don't look it. I have
Well,
to say.
sure, what can you do? I suppose my dad was a very ordinary man. Very ordinary man. He was 32 when he was killed. He was born in 1939, and he grew up in the Brandywell in Ann Street, actually in the prefabs, and there was 6 of us, and 8 of us in the house in Hamlin Street, 2 bedroom. I don't know how they done it.
No.
But that's the way it was. And he would have had to go to England on quite a few occasions during the 1960s to get work. But I don't remember him actually being away, but I know that he was away. And but he is a very kind man, very loving man. He was a man also who was known as you wouldn't mess with him.
Yeah.
His nickname was the Scalper, which means somebody who's handy with their wits, Yeah. And but no, he was a great father. I have some very fond memories of him. Up to I was 9 years of age. My younger brother Paul, who's just a year younger than me, he has a memory of a supergrass. He remembers 50 times more than I do. But he a couple of things about my dad I'm particularly proud of. It's one that he took part. He disappeared over the weekend of the Battle of the Bogside, and we just thought he's at work or whatever. And we lived in Hamilton Street in the Brandywell. It was just out near the Brandywell Sports Ground, just down near the river. And we had been evacuated up to Craigan because the Brandywell was thought to be too dangerous at that particular time. So I remember my dad disappeared, and we get a taxi. The man in the white shirt and the tie. So we were pots and pans and clothes and bedclothes and all the rest of it up to Craigan to my granny's house in Central Drive, and so we basically played around Craigan, but we knew there was something big going down and down the bog, and my dad had disappeared, but we never thought for a second that that's where he was. And so it's a source of great pride that he actually stayed out for the 3 days and 3 nights. And when he came back up, he walked up from the bog. It may well have been the Sunday afternoon or the Monday afternoon, but he was covered in soot. He walked over the street like a black man. That's what I thought he was, walking over the street, and realised that's who he was.
Defending the community.
He was defending the community against the RUC at the time, and that's when Free Derry was established. So my dad was part of that sort of bulwark within Free Derry against the RUC at the time. And I think the British Army had come in you're a lot older than me, so you'd remember, but they come in on the Monday, didn't they?
He did.
That's right. That's right.
All right.
So my dad come back up to the house. So he was very much involved and aware of what was going on at the time. It didn't come from a Republican background, not that I could really detect at the time. Although I remember that he described the British soldiers as limey bees. He called them because he wouldn't curse most of the time in front of us. So they were called limey bees, and we were wondering, what's a limey bee?
Yeah.
What's a limey bee? But he would use that old sort of Second World War or First World War word to describe them as limeys,
And they're still called that.
And they're still called limeys.
I mean the bee part.
They're still called the bees.
John's outlining Harry becomes involved, or how the family becomes involved in the campaign. I know you're the chairman of the Bloody Sunday Trust.
Yeah.
But was it the same experience that someone come along and say we're going to try and fight this and we're going to?
It probably was an evolution of things that were sort of processing over a long number of years. This isn't loose talk, right? But I joined the IRA in 19.
I think everybody knows
80.
it, but anyway, yeah.
I was in the Fianna first from about 78 on, and then I joined Iran in 1980. A long, illustrious career until February 1981. Ended up in the Crum, and then I ended up in the Case. Done 5 years, and that's a sort of byproduct. I'm sure we'll mention that again. But I got out in '85, and during the years that I was in, as you do, you tend to sort of reflect on who you are, what you are,
And
how you've
why?
ended up in jail,
Yeah,
and all the rest of it. And I mean, I wasn't particularly academically gifted or legal wise or any of that, but I did reflect quite often that I had ended up in jail for relatively minor IRA offences, and the person who killed my father has never seen the inside of a court before. So those are the type of things that were going on in my head at the time. And when I got out, I got to meet the families just at the march. Probably 1986 would have been the first march I'd have been at for a long time. I didn't know John at all, didn't know any of his family. Knew them all to see, but not sort of work out who they were. And I actually remember my granda on my mother's side, Conor Quigley, saying to me on the day after I got out of jail, he says, "You could be the boy to sort out what happened on Bloody Sunday." And I was wondering,
Why me?
what's he talking about? But obviously he saw something in me that I wasn't particularly aware of at the time. And then just over that course of the 1985, I was in Sinn Féin at the time as well, and Sinn Féin organised the march every year, which, you know, felt important at the time, but on reflection is even more important, because the issue of Bloody Sunday could well have disappeared, as the Ballymurphy had for donkey's years, but it was kept alive by Sinn Féin in Derry at the time. And then when I became more and more active with the families, 88, 89, chatting to Alexa Mitchell McLaughlin, that the party was actually quite happy for the families to take it over. You might remember those days yourself.
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
And then so the families became the sort of central function in terms of taking over the march, and then it broadened out. The march broadened out considerably after that, and then we started reflecting on how we might approach unifying the families, and trying to sort of reach,
Collating the campaign.
trying to sort of collate the campaign actually, and that happened in April 1992, but as a direct consequence of the 20th anniversary. So that acted as a bit of a springboard for us.
In 1972, I had occasion to go and live in Derry. I lived in Scéalta for a while, and it was a memorable experience, I can tell you. But one of the things that struck me, and I come from North Belfast, where McGurk's Bar happened, and you know, Belfast, like any other nationalist area, but anywhere in the six counties, isn't short of its tragedies. But it struck me talking to people, and maybe it was only the people that I was speaking to, it struck me that there was a terrible grief in Derry over Bloody Sunday. More grief than anger. People were kind of, I think, even almost accepting that it had happened and there was little you could do about it.
Yeah.
Was that only my experience?
No.
Or was that how a city felt?
That was very, I mean, John will have his own stories, but the other part of that story I told you about my grandfather, and this is going to be hard for me to tell, right? But I remember the second day I got out of jail on a Wednesday, and on the Friday I went to my granny and granddad's house. They had me dinner, because I always missed their food when I was in jail, right? And I remember him telling me about the man who came out to help my father after he had been shot, just in the seconds afterwards. And there's very famous photographs of him,
graphic stuff,
and Soldier F actually fired at that man as well. Paddy Walsh, he called him. And I remember my grandfather starting to cry when he was telling me about the story, and I thought, what's he doing in 1985? sitting there and crying about
Yeah,
what happened on Bloody Sunday. I mean, it probably sounds a bit disparaging, but
No,
I just found
understand.
it. I just found it odd
Yeah.
because I didn't cry in those days about what happened. Although I did really miss my father right up until I was in my mid-teens. So it did have a very, very profound effect, I think, on the people of the city, and I think part of that extended grief was about the fact that people couldn't really do anything about it.
Can I ask John a question there? And I know, because I've read about your mother and about the family, so I never met your mother, but and you talk about Willie taking photographs of her, taking snaps or filming her. How does a mother come to terms with that kind of, that the son goes out and doesn't come back, there's no explanation, there's no apology, lies are told upon lies, and books are written about the lies. Did your mother ever come to terms with that, or
Never.
and did she share that anger or that grief?
No, she didn't. If anything, my ma was more gracious, because I remember the nights years ago when you were young. The families all used to sit down and pray before they went to bed and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And but in the last, it was towards the last couple of years before my mother died, way back in 2007, that I mind asked because we were obviously heavy on the campaign, stuff like that, and I was asked her the questions, and I said, do you think it, because we're thinking about if we ever get maybe any justice, do you think that he should go to jail, the soldier that killed Wally and stuff like that? She said, I'm not really sure whether he should or not. And I asked her, why is that? She said, because you're probably going to suffer him and his family, right? And that's the type of person she was.
Yeah.
And then she said to me then, she actually prayed for him. She used to pray for him. So that shows you the type of
person that she was.
The person that she was.
I think in a way what your mother was doing was trying to remove bitterness from you.
That's exactly.
And
that's
nearly
exactly
by example of saying this is where we are.
Mm.
I suppose again, Bloody Sunday has become synonymous with the lawlessness of British occupation of this part of Ireland. But really, when you think about it, Bloody Sunday could have been in Derry or in Strabane or
anywhere.
I mean, do you have? I know you've went over this 1,000 times in your head why and tried to figure out in every angle, because that's how you fail a campaign. But do you think that Derry was significantly chosen to punish the nationalist community because it's primarily a nationalist city, or was it just the opportunities there killed?
I think there was a large degree of premeditation. I don't think that there was a written plan, and I don't think that the plan was sort of openly communicated. I think it probably existed in people's heads, as in and probably from the top down. I'm not sure how far up it would have went, but I think by the time the Paras got to Derry that day, they knew what they were going to do. I don't think there's any doubt whatsoever about that. I mean, and the immediate, the days immediate before Bloody Sunday, we're talking about taking out, shooting known ringleaders and all that type of language, which sounds. Known ringleaders is probably there's no such thing.
No, of course not.
So if you're a rioter, you're a rioter. Nobody really guides you. It's a bit chaotic. So I think what they were doing there was basically setting down the grounds for shooting people who were involved in street confrontations or riots. But I think by the time the Paras went into the bog that day, they knew what they were going to do. That their actions, I think, would clearly tell you that there was definite intent, because I wasn't there, but eyewitness accounts do very, very clearly point to the fact that once they got out of their vehicles, they got out in the shooting position and actually shot.
Yeah.
And then the main company of soldiers who carried out most of the shooting, they were actually detached from the main body actually of soldiers on the day and around Kells Walk, and anybody who was standing around the rubble barricade at the flats was literally shooting fish in a barrel. That's maybe twice the distance of this room. High velocity weapons and all the rest of it, they stood no chance. But also you could clearly see, because it was broad daylight, it was a very, very sunny day, they could clearly see who they were, what they were doing, and if they were armed, because you from that distance it would be easy to see a weapon. So I think that idea of taking out known ringleaders was a sort of byword for, you basically shoot who you can get at the time that you're in there. And I think the way that they behaved in and around the Kells Walk flats in Glenfadda would tell you that they were out to kill as many people as possible. There's no doubt whatsoever.
You mentioned an important part, I think, which is kind of missing from the equation, and we've had Savile, and we wouldn't have had Savile apart from the bravery of the families. I mean, the British government were never for having Savile inquests and inquiries and all that. Sorry, Savile inquiries. But the media, like a glove fits, like a hand fits a glove, moved right in to protect what had happened. The terminology that you are quoting them is used.
Yeah.
And then the cover up behind that, and then right through all of that. And I often wonder that had the media covered the truth in Ballymurphy, would Bloody Sunday not have happened? The media, I think, acquiesced around the cover up of what that were going on. But that's another. So go back to you, John. Just you have a campaign, you're part of a committee. You're not a committee person. You don't strike me as somebody who wants to join committees.
No, the campaign was an opportunity for me to do something about Bloody Sunday, and we used to meet every Tuesday night without fail, and up at West End Park there at the top of the Bogside, and the community house that was there, and every Tuesday at 7:30, and we at the start we hadn't got a clue what we were doing. I think we knew
what you wanted.
We wanted, but it was the first time any of us, I think, were involved in campaigns and stuff like that. But we obviously selected the people like Tony to do all the media stuff and stuff like that. But we were just the time that we went round the Bogside, the Craigan and the Brandywell to get signatures for the council, Derry City Council, to get money for offices, and we had to prove to the council that we were a genuine campaign and stuff like that. And then it was an SDLP council big time, so
it must have seemed like, a group of people, and with the greatest respect, they didn't have all the wars with them in terms of dealing with the media. They certainly weren't media. Media weren't friendly towards the campaign, and in fact were quite hostile towards the campaign, as I can recall. But was it like pushing the rock up the hill? Did you ever think that we're going to get there, or was it whoever on each one?
It's a good question. I think it is fair to say that that none of us really had any experience of campaigning. There was some degree of political activism among the families, but not a terrible lot. And there was a lot of families as well. So it's a lot of people.
Oh yeah.
A lot of big Catholic families. So
big egos, big opinions.
John had the biggest ego. So you had a lot of stuff to deal with and to try and put some sort of a shape on. And luckily, I suppose John Kelly, who was the oldest brother of Michael Kelly, was one of the people who was actually shot in the barricade that I mentioned earlier on. He was happy to take the position of chair, and he had no experience of chairing, by the way, but he was a quick learner, and so he would have sometimes as many as 25 people in a room smaller than this half of this room, right? and everybody smoking, and I had to smoke at the time as they do my head in. And so it took a lot to try and get a bit of order going, a bit of structure to meetings. I was a full-time activist at the time, so I had a bit of time to give to it, a fair bit of time, and I was asked to do this sort of public relations stuff. But in '92 itself, actually, well, we had all the practical difficulties, and then John had mentioned that the thing around the approaching the council for the funded campaign. What happened there was that the council decided that they would fund the campaign in principle, but they wouldn't actually fund it. They would support it in principle, but they wouldn't provide funds to it. And the reason why they said that they wouldn't provide funds to it is that because the Auditor General of local government said that there would be no material or psychological benefit. Now I can't remember the exact wording. Think of the times that we were in at that time. There would be no benefit to the residents of the city through a resolution of Bloody Sunday. That's hard to believe in this day and age. And the other thing then that, as you do when you set about, John mentioned about the petition, and we ran around the whole city, Scéalta and all, collecting signatures. We wrote to the Taoiseach, Charlie Haughey at the time, Uachtar in the Heron, Mary Robinson, and Cathal Daly, he was the Primate of All Ireland. They asked to meet. They all refused. All refused.
I have to tell you, I mean, and as I said when I was jokingly said, and John, this is no disrespect to me, I have known you a long time, and you apart from imprisonment and all of that, there, you know your way around. But that must have been heartbreaking for the families that they're, and most of these families are Catholic families, that their cardinal doesn't reply or doesn't meet, that the president doesn't meet, that the Taoiseach doesn't meet. Like, it must have been so cruel.
It was hard. I did an interview there earlier today too, and was I told the story about us writing letters to the president, Robson and Cathal Daly and all the rest of them, and not getting answers, especially Cathal Daly. Like, you thought you would have got an answer there, but you didn't. And I remember at the time that, especially when we wrote to President Robson, because just before that she laid a wreath at the Enniskillen bomb.
Sure.
And so we wrote, said we invite you up now to the Bogside at the lay a wreath there, and she refused. Just refused.
We won't dwell on those people who got it wrong, because it's hard. It's even hard for me. It's just as observing it, it must be difficult for you. But you're running around, you're getting signatures, you're talking to Derry Council, you're doing interviews. I want to come back to that. You're constantly defending those who were murdered. You're constantly refuting what the British government are saying and all of that. Can you remember the first big January march? Because I have a memory of it, but can you remember that when people came out in their thousands?
I think it had been growing steadily from the mid-90s onwards, isn't that right?
Early 90s.
Late 80s, early 90s. And when the campaign was established in 92, and we sort of set out our sort of bona fides, and we got all the families on board, regardless of what, I mean, some of them were SDLP families, and some were Sinn Féin, and some were didn't give a political damn, to be honest. And so we set that out, and we actually transformed the march in a sense from a party political march to a more family oriented thing. It was a 10-year on, and I think that actually clicked with a lot of people, because I think there was always a groundswell of support within the city. It just didn't have a channel or an outlet. I think the families provided that outlet. So by about 94, 95 and 96, I mean, there was absolute huge crowd. I mean, 40 and 50,000 people were converging out of in Derry, and people from Derry, when the demands for the objectives of the campaign, and then we sort of lit upon the need for a second inquiry. That was clearly the mechanism, actually the only legal mechanism that there was. And if that hadn't happened, we may still be in the same position. The thing to remember about Bloody Sunday, and this is all weird now when you look back on it, is that there was no criminal investigation.
Yeah.
The judicial inquiry was announced on the Monday, right? Monday morning, and but there was no criminal investigation. So 13 people, and you saw it here in Belfast on many an occasion by Ballymurphy and all Spring Hill and New Lodge and all the rest of it. But seeing you think back at it now,
Yeah.
it's actually insane.
Absolutely.
It's complete
It's criminal.
insanity that they were able to shoot 13 boys and men dead within the space of 25 minutes, within 200 square yards, and nobody investigates it.
And somebody
You know.
deemed it's legal. The reason I was asking you the question, and I promised you I wouldn't ask you a trick question, but it was a trick question, and I'll tell you why. Because my experience and the geographics of the march, if I can remember, is it nearly goes back on itself. Is it
Yeah.
one part of the march you can look back and see
See
nearly the
part?
beginning?
And
And I remember being on that march and the families in front with the banner, and this kind of whisper came back, look behind you. And as we looked, thousands, just
Yeah.
thousands, and there were families that were there were children that were there were pensioners, there were all kinds, and it was for me that sense of these people are not going to go away. And that's why I asked you that question. It wasn't to try and
yeah,
pick your memory.
yeah.
Was there ever at that stage, and we're going to move on, but was there ever at that stage, apart from the smoke-filled rooms and everybody wanting to be the boss and everybody wanting to talk, and was there ever a stage where it just, with all the lies that were told and the glorification of the paras and all of that, and the rejection of people who should know better, was there ever a stage where you thought, forget it?
There probably was. I
Maybe there was many.
can't mind them. I mind when, like, times you'd held a protest and there wouldn't have been a wild lad there and stuff like that, and you were saying, "Jeez, are we going to get anywhere?" But it was always in you. They go forward and they keep on going. I would have never, I would have never crossed my mind to say, right, that's it. That's like a couple of realists have said, that's me on Bloody Sunday finished now. That's it. Or if they got a disappointment or a door closed on them or something like that, they didn't really mean it.
No,
They were just angry.
People say, of course, yeah.
Because then people are still
they're still there.
I think what, just to answer your question, I think all the families, if not most of them, expected to be listened to, expected their story to be accepted, and expected people who were in leadership positions throughout the island and beyond to accept it and to sort of take them up at
To do the right thing.
To do the right thing. I think that first year I think was quite difficult because there was a lot of knockbacks locally and nationally, and it was difficult for people actually to try and rise above that. But I think there was a sort of there's a hard nut of unity within the families that would probably see us through practically anything, but and I think that accounted for the success of the campaign. We had a core of people who were there on a daily basis, who carried the campaign, and the rest of the families were happy because they were all working, rearing families and all the rest of it. They were happy at that sort of core, but had that core not been available or not been intact throughout the whole campaign, it may not have been successful, because it is sometimes difficult to keep everybody on message in the room and all the rest of it, but we did it quite well.
And I think we underestimate the determination of the cover-up, delay, deny, and just wait till people die.
Yeah.
I want to, just by virtue of time, I want to move you forward. You've got Savile. It looks at kind of, the stories are coming out and all there. I don't know what it was like in Derry, but we were getting here stories, Savile's he's not very fair, or he's asking this question, or why does he want to know, and all that there. And how hard was it? I don't even mean the gruesome details of how people were murdered, but how physically and mentally hard was it for families to sit through that big, long, forever period of Savile? And I'm going to ask you a writer that question. one of the things that the Brits very deliberately done, whether it was premeditated, was they kept talking about the price, the cost of Scéalta, as if there is a cost of truth. But it was as if the families are making this money, this cost, when we all know now it was the MOD delaying and all of that. But her physically, for both of us as individuals, and then reflect how hard it was on the families.
Yeah, well, I suppose for me and you, we had the benefit of youth. Relative youth, may I say.
I was going to say that, but we'll let you away with that one.
But no, it was quite difficult and draining, and sometimes emotionally exhausting for the vast majority of people. But the inquiry actually sat in the Guildhall, I think, from about 2001. For an inordinate, I mean, a really long period of time. And the thing about the length of time was the first inquiry that the now infamous Lord Ridgery presided over took 6 weeks. It basically sat for 6 weeks and then had the report out.
It was written on the first hour, probably.
I would say so.
Yeah.
So you had that. You know, that was a brief flirtation with the law, in a sense, you know, our legal process, whereas the second one went on for years. It was announced in 98, but it didn't actually report until 2010, so 12 full years. And so it sat in the Guildhall in Derry for a number of years, and which was great in a sense, because it allowed people who were witnesses but were never treated as witnesses at the time of the Widgery Tribunal, because their evidence was basically rejected, even before it got the like a verbal hearing. So it was qualitatively different and quantitatively different as well. And then it moved into the Westminster Hall in London to hear the soldiers and military related evidence that was all heard in London. So the families had to go over on a Sunday night, or those who could travel on a regular basis had to go over through Stansted on a Sunday night down to London, and they would have stayed then for the full week up to Thursday, and then back on Thursday night or a Friday. So not everybody could do it, and those who were working, like myself, you had to just choose your moments when you should or when you could attend, and you know.
I'm not going to rehearse Savile, because we all know Savile is less than perfect. We all agree on that, and Savile, even within the confines of what he found, sometimes there's more contradictions than there are successes. But you moving out and you addressing the world media and saying, you know, this is justice for a city, it's justice for a community, it's justice for, like, I mean, that was very, very powerful. Were you aware of the impact that you were having on people across the north who were looking justice? Were you aware that Bloody Sunday was, and justice for, in quote unquote, was for everyone?
Symbolically, we were all very aware. There's absolutely no doubt. And I do remember actually standing before I went to speak, and that exact thought actually came into my head. I said, look, this is for, and in my head I was saying, this is for my dad, this is for the rest of the men and boys whose families were gathered on either side, but this is for everybody else as well. And particularly those who were afflicted by state violence, because we were all treated the same. It just so happened that there was more of us associated with the massacre on Bloody Sunday than most our events, but they were all treated the same, and so I did feel that. I did feel I did feel that as a sort of an opportunity. I actually felt really privileged that day, being on the platform and representing the families and making the main speech in response to David Cameron, although and also in response to the report, none of which we didn't know before we went into the Guildhall that morning what they were going to say, right? So we had to do some degree of preparation, and the Bloody Sunday Trust at the time was very much involved in the drawing up of the family statement and and all that, but we didn't know.
Some
So
statement
it
was
could have been a disaster.
made an hour before.
Ah,
Do you
right,
mind?
yeah.
Because I remember you inside
Yeah.
the Scéalta and going round all the families and saying, "Do you want this? Do you want this to be put in?" This to
Yeah.
I want to come on to what's happening now, but I want to prefix it by saying, in fact, in your own case, with Soldier F and all of that, justice hasn't been done. We're still in that battle. We collectively are still in that battle for justice. The issue has been raised. The arguments are over, insofar as murder was murder, and that's exactly what it was. But the family still are searching for that last man. This week in Derry, there's all sorts of stuff happening. So, do you want to give us a flavour of what you're at now?
Aye, well, you're right that this is a big week for the families. It's the 50th anniversary. The slogan for the anniversary is "One Word, One Struggle." We're very, very conscious of people who have helped us over the years, and we would like to reciprocate in whatever way we can. So we're looking at Derry, Ireland, and the world. In terms of events, working back from the Sunday, if people are going up to Derry on the Sunday, they can join the families at the Craig Shops at 9:15 in the morning, and we will be taking part in the Walk of Remembrance from the shops right down along the original route. And what we're saying, by the way, is that we're asking anybody and everybody who supports justice and would like to walk with the families to come along, regardless of their politics, regardless of where they live, what community they belong to, and all that. We have an open door. There'll be no flags, banners, bands. This is just us, the people walking in dignified silence along the route. 9:15, Craig Shops. Later on in the afternoon, and the families again are planning an event in the city centre. It's called Beyond the Silence, which alludes to the silence that struck the city in the days after Bloody Sunday. And we will have a dedication in the Guildhall Square, actually delivered by Adrian Dunbar.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Very good.
and Bruna Gallagher, and a few hours. So that's a dedication to the memory of the dead. It's very, very simple and poignant ceremony. And then on the Saturday night, Damien Dempsey,
Yeah.
great dub.
Absolutely.
He's playing in the Millennium Forum. There's still some tickets left for that. In the afternoon of the Saturday, we have no less a figure than the great Jeremy Corbyn. He's going to deliver the 50th annual lecture. So it's really, really fitting that we've got him for this. As a massive coup for the families, and really, because I think a lot of people here believe in him.
Yes.
Even though he's a
yeah,
British
yeah.
Labour
Yeah,
leader
yeah,
at one
yeah,
stage.
yeah.
We really believe in him as being the genuine article when it comes to really radical leadership. So those are the main events on the Friday and the Saturday. What's happening on the Saturday and Sunday? What's happening on the Friday? Mine's blank.
I'm
Anybody
sure.
who needs the information can get it on bloodysunday50.com. That's our website for the anniversary.
I want to finish by saying this, and this is me taking advantage of you being in the Connolly Centre. And I would have asked you had we had more time, but time is always on the side of running out. And you talked about being a PRO, and you talked about your own loss, and you talked about your father and that. Bloody Sunday, in my opinion, wouldn't have happened without sections of the media and sections of people who should know better allowing it to happen or covering it up. And I have read articles and interviews that you have done, and about all of it. I have yet to read your book, and I look forward to reading it. But the book that you wrote about your father's memory is heartbreaking. And I don't know whether the producing of the book was something that helped you or hindered you, but I would commend the book. So tell us a wee bit about the book. You've only got a second, so tell us how the book came about.
Okay, I'm a 3 times published author now, so it's great to say that. My first book came out in 2016. It's called This Man's Wee Boy.
That's the book I'm referring
Yeah,
to.
and it's, I suppose in a sense, it's an exploration from a child's perspective of his relationship with his father from about 1967 right up to
Of a
1972.
stolen father.
Of a stolen father, absolutely. And so I really enjoyed the process of writing and rediscovering my father by talking to my brothers and sisters, my aunts and uncles. I talked to my mother actually, and who died in August 2014, and so I'd been visiting her down at her house, and if she had known that I was writing things on the slide, she would probably have clammed up. But I got a lot out of her in the last months before she died, which was great.
I would commend that book to anyone. You see, if you're trying to find, because the missing story is the family's. It's your mother's story about the photographs. It's all of that, and to understand not the campaign. The campaign's very important, but the campaign is not as important as people. And I would commend that book. So we need to see your book. I need you to write the book. You need to write a book. I just want to correct you on one thing. I think that you shouldn't underestimate the courage and the bravery and the determination and the leadership of those families, not only around their own campaign, not only around the Bloody Sunday massacre, but the support they've given to all the others, to Valamurphy, to the White Rat, to McGurk's, and the many more campaigns. And Bloody Sunday is very much seen to be the champion of justice. So for coming to Derry, to Belfast, for taking the time when you've got a million of work to do, can I thank both of you, John, and can I thank you, Tony? Gordon, and thank you.
Say the man.
Very much.